Hello, sociologists. I wanted to speak with you specifically today about socialization. Socialization is the process where we learn to become human. It's where we get to understand our culture. It's the process by which we learn our culture from a host of valuable others, including our family, our friends, and major institutions for which we come in contact. So socialization is that process of us becoming human. It's the process of us learning about those concepts we talked about in culture, our norms, our values, our beliefs. I want to speak for a moment about beliefs because I know when we talked about culture, there's a lot of focus on norms and values, but really beliefs are incredibly powerful. Think about the very simple belief that gets instilled quite early in a young child. And I know oftentimes it's subtle. It's presented in lots of children's storybooks if you look carefully. And that message is, boys are superior. And sure, I have to admit, I am speaking as an adult where I am interpreting that information from the children's books that I read. But if you look at children's books, inanimate objects, animals, things that don't even need to be gendered are often labeled as boys. And particularly when those things need to demonstrate strength or character, those are attributed as male characteristics. So that message is getting through, even though it might be done very subtly, like with male pronouns. Now, some of you may disagree entirely with what I had to say. I'm okay with that. This is definitely a matter for debate, but I wanted to point this out. I mean, I wanted to point it out as something to think about. Even if you think about it and then reject it, it's worth thinking about. What are the messages that come across to very young children? And a simple belief like boys are superior gets instilled very, very young. In our textbook, it talks about girls and kind of the princess stories, and all girls are princesses. So kind of similar, although I think the boys are superior message comes across at a much more elementary level, meaning at a very earlier stage in storytelling for children. So these beliefs are learned. They're not innate, but they're instilled in us at such an early time, we're not able to tell later on when we're intellectually thinking about that. Is that something we learned, or maybe that's just true? Maybe that's something biologically true. In your textbook, it's talking about that concept of, is it more from nature, or is it biological, or is it more from nurture, or is it something learned and socialized into us? You know, as a sociologist, I tend to think we're a lot more nurture than nature. But some people might take issue with that. So I wanted to bring up that idea of beliefs to just kind of give an example that thoughts are instilled in us at a very early age, and small children are not able to assess whether or not those thoughts are valid or not. They just accept them. Pardon. When I think about socialization, and if you think about your own socialization, or perhaps you're a parent and you've been in the situation to socialize others, how much of that socialization is planned? Or is it that it's happenstance and children just kind of get exposed to stuff and therefore they absorb it? So thinking about the articles that we have to read for this lesson, invisible privilege, think about the concepts within that article. did the little girls get exposed to certain ways of life because that was planned? Or was it was just happenstance? And so they learned things that their parents weren't intending to expose them to, like differences in their socioeconomic status that were based on race? Or is it they start getting those messages really, really subtly and make early understandings about things and about the world from those subtle messages? Similarly, our article on socialization and the power of advertising, that's an interesting article because, to go back to my earlier discussion about beliefs, a core belief in exposing children to advertising is the belief in capitalism and the belief in making money and the belief in that the best products win. Those are really core beliefs that go to why would we even expose children to advertising in the first place? Because in some ways that view of capitalism overrides or is stronger than a sense of needing to protect children from those messages. But going back to whether socialization is planned or rather happenstance, socialization and the power of advertising talks about in schools particularly. Parents send their children to schools, but they don't necessarily know what messages they might be getting through advertising in the schools. You don't know if your children are being, not you personally, rather, I'm talking about the kind of generalized you. As a parent, you might not know, is my child going to be learning about drinking soda because there's a very large soda machine at school and all the other children are wanting to buy some? Or are they going to learn about different kinds of candy or sweet treats that maybe a parent wouldn't expose them to at home? Those are all things that, those are messages that children might be getting because there could be advertising in their school setting. Speaking a little bit more about socialization and the development of the self, I'm going to pivot now to just talk about Mead in particular. So George Herbert Mead is an early sociologist, and the chapter introduces you to his concept of the self. So Mead's concept of the self is that children imitate important other people in their world. They imitate their parents, they imitate their siblings, they imitate friends that they might meet or other kinship members. So really that imitation is where they're learning to take on the responsibilities. They're learning very early interaction, and in doing so they're practicing with the norms and beliefs that they see happening within their day-to-day lives. Mead goes on to say that through play, children learn to take on roles, how to interact with each other. So they learn to take on different roles, and that different roles work in compatible ways. And then in the game stage, those roles are more interactive. Now, Mead also talks about the generalized other. The generalized other is that sense of kind of what's right in the world. That generalized other is kind of that separate set of what we think are the beliefs of others and how they might view us. The generalized other is an example that we've internalized the norms of our society. And we've likely, at the time we've internalized those norms, we've also internalized the values of that society. Now, what's interesting about the generalized other, and something I like to focus on when teaching about socialization, is that socialization teaches us to conform. It teaches us to conform to our society, to our culture. So the chapter finishes out by talking about the agents of socialization, surely hitting on the importance of family. Family teaches us culture. They're our first exposure into the world. So family teaches us a lot. And it teaches a lot of the kinds of lessons that they're not easily undone at a later time in development. Those core beliefs that you get from your family will probably stick around with you for the remainder of your life. Even if you learn things that are contrary, even if you later on hold contrary beliefs, those very beginning beliefs that you have are still going to be embedded with you. Peers are important and you learn a lot from them, but at the same time, think about the importance of school and the influence of school and religion in a very early child development. Those are two social institutions that children have early relationships with that have a lot of impact on children's development. Surely, work and the government are important agents of socialization, and go on to tell you and suggest that, socialization is across a life course. It's not limited to just early childhood development. Now, your book also mentions the media, and Socialization and the Power of Advertising definitely gets at that idea of the media. The media is incredibly powerful. And if we think about the amount of time young children spend engaging in media activity, whether that's on the television or on the computer or some other access to the internet, like whether that's on a phone or one of those tablet devices or in a video game. These media exposures are something for real consideration. I mean, if early children learn through imitation and they're spending a lot of time with the media, they're probably going to be imitating from those others that they see in those venues, because they are developing relationships with those virtual others, because that's the way children are. Anyway, I hope you found this talk informative, and there's a lot of great information in this week's lesson. So I hope to chat with you soon. Thanks.